Tucker is up next. We're going to have final exam. Watch it.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. It has been more than a week since the last votes were cast in the 2018 midterms. That was last Tuesday. But still, several big races remain unresolved at this hour. In the state of Florida, recount is ongoing. We're going to have more on that in just a minute. It's a pretty weird story. But perhaps strangest of all is what is happening right now in Georgia. The race for governor of Georgia was tight for months. You probably followed it. But it finished in the end pretty much exactly where the polls predicted it would finish. The Republican, Brian Kemp, defeated the Democrat, Stacey Abrams, by about 1.5 percentage points. In a big state, that is an awful lot of votes. For reasons she hasn't really explained, though, Stacey Abrams has refused to accept those results. Her allies are now claiming the election was stolen.
If Stacey Abrams doesn't win in Georgia, they stole it. It's clear. It's clear.
Stacey Abrams' election is being stolen from her using what I think are insidious measures to disenfranchise certain groups of people.
I know Stacey well. She was one of my really strong surrogates in the campaign. If she'd had a fair election, she already would have won.
Election fraud, that's what they're saying. And by the way, is there anyone more fraudulent than Cory Booker? Think about that. But back to election fraud. It's a serious charge, and it's telling that nobody making that charge has provided any evidence that it actually happened. No detail at all. Most remarkable of all, though, is that Hillary Clinton is one of the voices in this chorus. We keep track, and we remember Hillary's view just 2 years ago. Here's what she thought of losing candidates who claim the election is rigged.
That's horrifying. You know, every time Donald thinks things are not going in his direction, he claims whatever it is rigged against him. That is not the way our democracy works. We've been around for 240 years. We've had free and fair elections. We've accepted the outcomes when we may not have liked them. He is denigrating, he's talking down our democracy. And I, for one, am appalled.
She's appalled. You got to accept the outcomes you don't like. But it turns out that accepting outcomes you don't like is something only Republicans are required to do. Richard Nixon had an entire presidential election stolen from him by JFK in 1960. Liberals applauded when Nixon chose not to contest that election. But Democrats do not apply the same standard to themselves. When Democrats lose, there is always a reason that has nothing to do with alienating voters or getting fewer votes. It's Putin rigged the machines. The Macedonians hacked Facebook. Roger Stone sent unapproved tweets. Or the perennial favorite, you're racist. All of you who didn't vote for us, you're racist. You're immoral bigots. And of course, that's what we're hearing once again now. By the way, it's a lie. America is not a racist country. It's a kind and decent country. But the left hopes that by calling you enough names, they'll bully you into giving them more power. They always try that, and sometimes it works. It might work this time. The question is, what's the cost to the country? Peter Kirsanow is a U.S. Civil Rights Commissioner, a frequent guest on the show. He joins us again tonight. Peter, thanks a lot for coming on. So first, as a factual question, this is someone who's a rigorous thinker, I think, and has been following this. Is there evidence, real evidence, that Stacey Abrams has had this election stolen from her?
There's absolutely no evidence that I think anyone's adduced. But what we're seeing here, I think, is a test run for the 2020 election. It's not merely a test run. They're doing this in this election. They've done it in previous elections, although I will say that I don't think in my nearly 2 decades on the Civil Rights Commission I've seen the intensity of the type of overt and naked racial appeals and identity politics appeals that I've seen in this election cycle. And perhaps you could go back even before the 1957 Civil Rights Act to the Deep South, Orville Faubus, Lester Maddox, George Wallace. And there's a reason for it. There are several reasons for it. But one is it works. And they're trying to delegitimize the election in advance, but it's a test run because think about how difficult it is for your average leftist to try to convince a voter that they should accept their unworkable or somehow nutty, sometimes nutty politics or policy prescriptions versus simply saying that person's a racist, that person's a bad person, all the right-thinking people know that person's a racist, and it has an ancillary effect. That is, it keeps blacks on the Democratic reservation. This is existential for the Democratic Party. They need at least 90% of the black vote just to be competitive, and even 90% plus of the black vote. And so they engage in these types of maneuvers and rhetoric on a regular basis. But the additional effect that's helpful is it makes, and I think you alluded to this, there is a certain subset of white voters who they also want to align themselves with the right-thinking folks, and they don't want to be aligned with those that all the right-thinking people say are racist or despicable. So to feel good about themselves, they'll vote in the prescribed manner.
Right. And you're absolutely right that it works, and they've been doing it an awfully long time. But I think in almost 30 years of covering elections, I've never seen it at this volume. You just a second ago said there are a couple of reasons for it. The first is it works, and I agree with you. What are the other reasons? Why is it accelerated now, do you think?
Because, I think some of it is because the policy think about how far the Democrats have gone to the left. And it's difficult to get more than a certain percentage of voters to align themselves with those kinds of policy prescriptions. It's a lot easier to comprehend an appeal based on identity politics. If, for example, what's her name, Alexandria Cortez were to go out and try to convince a voter how it is that extending Medicare to all or free college tuition is not going to bankrupt the economy, even most obtuse voter is going to laugh her off of the stage. Right. It's a lot easier to say, vote for me because I am of whatever identity it may be, and make an appeal on that basis and have media acolytes continue to echo that on a regular basis. A significant portion of this is because of Donald Trump and the continued attempts to paint Donald Trump and anyone who supports him as a racist. In some respects, it has been successful. I think it's backfired in other respects. But you're seeing something that they're going to test out big time in 2020.
Yeah. No, I think that's really smart. Thank you for making sense of that. Peter Kirsanow, one of our favorite guests. Well, Democrats have to choose a new Speaker of the House in just a couple of weeks. No choice. They got to do it. Nancy Pelosi brought the party to its biggest win in a long time. They've been out of power 8 years. Now they have power back. But a lot of Democrats say they don't want her as the Speaker. At least one left-leaning cable host is confused by this.
The party picks up more seats in the House than at any time since the immediate aftermath of Watergate. And the party responds to that by maybe turfing out their leader in the House. We just had the biggest gain since Watergate. Pelosi must pay. Yeah, but Schumer, you guys are good. I mean, nothing against or for Schumer or against or for Pelosi, but how does that math work?
Well, that's not a crazy point, is it? Tammy Bruce is a radio host, president of Independent Women's Voice. She joins us tonight. So, Tammy, it seems to me like the Democratic Party may have reached the identity politics cul-de-sac, where it's racist to keep Nancy Pelosi because she doesn't look like the emerging Democratic Party, but it would be sexist to kick her out because she is the highest-ranking woman. So what do?
That's right, and also ageist, obviously. I mean, if you want to go for anybody there, I think she's look, I value experience. Maddow is partly correct, but at the same time, I thought Donald Trump was responsible for their success. I don't think Nancy Pelosi, according to the Democrats, had anything to do. I want Donald Trump to be the Speaker of the House if it's about who, So come on, let's be honest. A bottom line is that there is a strata there in the Democratic Party that understands that the establishment is out of touch. That this is the same kind of dynamic that they've been dealing with for years, that they have no answers and no prescription policies. And the people that said that when they were running that they were going to vote against her, it's because they were also running not as Democrats. They were pretending they weren't Democrats. They were assuring everyone we're not going to vote for the same old dynamic and the status quo. And that's what Nancy Pelosi is. And so, look, they understand the party's got to change. And yet Nancy's also the only one who raises money. So on the other hand, all these socialists also want more money, and Nancy's the one to get it to them. So look, she is the best one for it. If you're right, no matter what they do, they're racist, sexist, ageist, and I don't know if we can fit homophobe in there somewhere. I'm sure that's a factor. But look, I've got my popcorn. I'm watching this, and maybe they should make Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez the speaker.
I'm rooting for her, but it's just
I would
interesting.
Love that.
I mean, it's like one of the deep truths of life that you never suffer as much as when you get what you think you want. Right. So they took the House back. They took the House back, and all of a sudden they have to deal with each other. That's correct. The ultimate nightmare, isn't it?
Well, it's the Frankenstein monster, right? They've created this. They're Dr. Frankenstein. They thought they had this great idea, and then the lightning struck, and they've got it. The monster woke up. And then suddenly the monster's chasing you around your office, and they're not quite sure. It's a friend, and maybe not your friend. But see, this
maybe not
your friend. But for those of us, of course, who care about the country, we see this as the charade that it is. And while they are, of course, my first book was about the racism, sexism, and homophobia on the left. We are going to hear about that for the next 2 years, as your first guest noted. This is the test run. This is about demonizing people. There will be no ideas, and the Republicans had better be ready to be able to counter that narrative and stand up for the American people, led by the approach and the action of the president. We've got 2 years to get it right, and we've got to start right away.
You better toughen up a little bit. I agree with that. Yeah. Tammy Bruce, thanks a lot. Great to see you.
Thank you.
Well, there's another Florida recount. You know that. It's been going on for a week. It's in progress tonight. The Senate race between Rick Scott, the Republican, Bill Nelson, the Democrat, is still ongoing. Florida's Secretary of State has ordered a manual recount. Craig Patrick is the political editor and chief investigator at Fox 13 in Tampa Bay. He's been on this for us since the beginning. He joins us once again tonight. Craig, what is going on?
We have weird news in Florida. By the way, you also have a disputed race until now in the race for governor. But while Andrew Gillum gained on Ron DeSantis, he gained but one single vote net. With that, that one is over, though Gillum has not reconceded. You're going to have Ron DeSantis now moving into the governor's mansion. In the race for Senate, yes, there is now this hand recount because they are close enough to trigger it, which takes us into next week. That's the good news for Bill Nelson. The bad news for Bill Nelson is that he gained absolutely nothing from the machine recount that concluded today. In fact, he lost net votes to Rick Scott. Rick Scott ran up his lead through the first phase of the recount, which leaves Nelson in a position of being the political equivalent of Bruce Willis from Sixth Sense, and that his career is over. He just does not know it yet, and he is playing that out. And you have more blunders in Southeast Florida counties, the Democratic strongholds. You have Palm Beach County. There, the bad news is that their machines continued to sputter and fail and melt down. And Palm Beach County fell flat on its face and was unable to complete the recount, meaning they just go back to their original results. If there's any good news there in Palm Beach County, it's that they're not Broward County to the south. And the good news, Tucker, in Broward County is that Brenda Snipes, after all the blunders, said she finally did it today. She finally did something right, that they, after all the hand-wringing, were able to meet the deadline to complete their recount. She said they did it with minutes to spare, and as she celebrated, the bad news is she forgot they had to transmit it to the state, and then they fumbled around with the computer, couldn't figure out how to do it in time. They were 2 minutes late, and as per the law in Florida, the recount results in Broward County got rejected by the state.
You have conclusively convinced me not to run for office in Broward County. Thank you, Craig.
Thank you.
I'm not going to attempt it.